Omagyanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmilitanjena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So our Dandavat Pranams affection to our group here today. And I'm now in Portugal, in the blazing heat of Portugal. And we were just discussing, right, how we have to learn to tolerate, right? And some of our group are in the cold, some of our group are in the heat. But we remember Krishna's advice in Bhagavad Gita, right? I was remembering that verse, Machas Parshastu Kunteya Sitoshna Sukha Dukkada Agama Payino Nityas Tam Titikshasha Bharata Titikshasva. This is the key word. Krishna tells Arjuna, you must tolerate, right? It is the only solution, right? It is the only solution, right? This world is always going to be throwing different curveballs at us, right? Too much heat, too much cold, and all kinds of other dualities of this world. But we don't want to spend our whole lives living on this surface level of the senses, right? We want to go to some deeper plane of reality. And so we must tolerate, right? This is Krishna's advice. But it is also very embarrassing, when we experience, we're remembering this advice of Krishna and Gita, but then we experience when we're actually facing these situations, like now I'm facing this heat in Portugal and I'm embarrassed, how much I've been complaining about it. And I think, oh my goodness, like all those Bhagavad Gita lessons out the window, in an instant. So it's embarrassing and humbling, to face our own fallibility as human beings, right? But anyhow, we try to adjust ourselves as much as possible and go on. And today is a very special day, right? This is our good fortune, right? That no matter what's going on in our own version of reality at any given time, that eternal version of reality is always playing out. And whenever we have the inclination, we can tap into that, right? We can tap into that eternal flow, that eternal current, and always receive nourishment from that, right? And then the other thing, right, is the more that we tap into that eternal flow of reality, the less we'll be concerned with our current plane of duality, right? Like for example, I was, being here in this weather, in the countryside, summer Portugal, I've been thinking about the six Goswamis, right? Now we have fans and some people have air conditioners and so on, but not so long ago, that such a thing wasn't heard of, right? And then think of how the Goswamis lived in Vrindavan, living under trees, through the heat, through the cold. Like we can think about that, living under trees with hardly any clothes, exposed to all the extreme elements. And Vrindavan is a particularly challenging place, right? It has more extremes than many other parts of India. Tungarasa is saying even Srila Guru Maharaj. Yes, in fact, there was one occasion we hear our Param Gurudev Srila Sridhar Maharaj when he almost he told the way he told our Gurudev Srila Govinda Maharaj, he almost died one night because he was part of one traveling kirtan preaching party throughout India, and they were in one place in the winter, had nowhere to stay. They slept under a bridge, and this was in the cold, in the winter time, and it was the height of winter. So it was icy cold. They had nowhere to stay, so they slept under a bridge. And he said he almost froze to death that night. And so, we can take some inspiration thinking of them, but we also know, right, how is it that these great souls can tolerate such things? Because they're so connected, right? They're so internally connected to a higher plane of reality, right? And so they're aloof, right? As Srila Sridhar Maharaj would say, everything is existing within consciousness, right? So the more that our consciousness becomes absorbed in a higher reality, the less we'll be affected by this earthly plane and all the dualities that come along with it, right? And so it is deeply inspiring to think of their example. Of course, we cannot imitate them, right? We can't we're not ones to pretend that we're at another level, right? The reason they can tolerate such extremes in this world is because they're so deeply connected to a to another plane, right? And because it's not that they're just living a life of dry renunciation, but they're actually tasting the most intense type of sweetness and nectar, and that allows them to transcend any experience of this worldly plane, right? And so there are many persons who do, try to imitate the way that they lived, but they're missing the point, that it's not about renunciation actually, but it's about being more deeply connected to a higher plane, right? And living uh, in a more intense state of devotion to the point where you're unaware, you're aloof to what's happening in this plane, right? So anyhow, today, as I mentioned, and many of you are aware, it's a special, very special day for us. A day of a day to remember multiple great personalities. We have so many, we have our Vaishnava calendar, right? And there are so many special days that are associated with so many days in a year, but there are a few days where there's like a congregation of multiple great personalities, right? And I think the one with the most um, personalities associated with it is Vasanta Panchami, which is in February. It's the official first day of spring in India. And it's the appearance and disappearance day of so many great souls. And then today is also, if not second, maybe third most, right? So it is Guru Purnima. It's a day to honor one's guru. It's Purnima, the full moon, and it is a day to honor one's guru. It is the appearance of Vyasadeva, right? And Vyasadeva, Srila Vedavyas, he's also seen as all gurus are seen as representative of Vedavyas, right? And so it's Vyasadev's appearance day. Then it's also a day for us to honor our guru and all of our gurus, right? So it is also known as Guru Purnima. It is also the disappearance day of Sanatan Goswami, right? Sanatan Goswami, of the famed six Goswamis who we were just speaking of, incidentally. The famous six Goswamis of Vrindavan, who were special agents of Mahaprabhu, we can say, right? Delegated to put his teachings into writing, right? And so Rup and Sanatan in particular, they had this, they were directly empowered, right? I don't want to say their role was more or less important than some of the other Goswamis, because Raghunath Das Goswami and Jiva Goswami also had very important roles. But Rupa and Sanatan are unique because they were directly, personally instructed by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and empowered by him personally to put his message into writing. And that is documented in Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita by Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. These chapters in the Madhya Lila, right, known as Rupa Shiksha, Mahaprabhu's instruction to Rupa Goswami, and then Sanatan Shiksha, Mahaprabhu's instructions to Sanatan Goswami. And actually, we in London, I just came from London, and we were just going through the first chapter. The Rupa Shiksha is just one chapter, and it's much shorter. It was around 10 days that Mahaprabhu was instructing Rupa Goswami. But then Sanatan Goswami, uh, did I say Rupa Goswami was 10 days, and then Sanatan Goswami was around 2 months, as I recall. And it's around four, maybe five chapters in Chaitanya Charitamrita. And so it's much more extensive. Um, and then we just went through the first chapter of that Sanatan Shiksha. And I have to say, if I'm allowed, it is one of my most favorite chapters in Chaitanya Charitamrita. It's so juicy, you know. It's got everything, right? It's a story of adventure, humor, um, intense emotion, and then at the conclusion is this profound instruction um, of Mahaprabhu giving him these teachings, which are not for his sake actually, because Sanatan's an enlightened being, but for the sake of conveying that knowledge to others, right? And some of you will be familiar with this pastime, but it's just so ecstatic, that whole section. And it starts because Sanatan Goswami, he Divi Shardi is asking to repeat. It's Madhya Lila, right? The middle section of Chaitanya Charitamrita. And I think chapter 17 is Rupa Shiksha, Mahaprabhu's instruction to Rupa. And then it's around chapter 18. Okay, 17. Yeah. So 17 is to Rupa. And then around 18 to 22, those chapters is Sanatan Shiksha, Mahaprabhu's instructions to Sanatan Goswami. And so the history with Sanatan, as we hear, is uh Rupa and Sanatan, right? They have this background of they were born in this very, you know, high Brahmin family in East Bengal, what is now Bangladesh. And but they were forcefully recruited by this Nawab Hussein Shah, who was one of the more nasty of the Muslim rulers. And he forcefully recruited them um, into his service. And they had very prominent positions in the Muslim government, right? The Mohammedans were ruling most of India at that time, and they were very highly situated. Sanatan Goswami was the prime minister, and Rupa Goswami was the finance minister, if I'm not mistaken. So very highly positioned, and this Nawab, he relied on them heavily, right? Because they were so skilled. But meanwhile, he was carrying on with, pretty horrible work, conquering and terrorizing temples in different parts of India. So it was, people complain about their jobs, but they really had terrible jobs, They really, really had. They had good reason to hate their jobs. But they couldn't get out, And I recently was going through some biography of Rupan Sanatan, and it was explained that it wasn't just that this Nawab like threatened them and forced them, but he was threatening their loved ones, like threatening to harm their loved ones if they didn't, come into this government service. So they really had no choice. Anyhow, they were doing this work for the government, but very much wanting to get out of it. And some of you will recall how they at one point wrote to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu requesting permission to leave their work and worldly life behind and come and stay with him full time in his sannyas life. And at that time Mahaprabhu gave them this cryptic answer, that a married woman who has a secret lover will do her household work with more attention, right? Very curious answer, right? Indicating, keep this within your heart, but go about your work in the world, right? You don't have to change your situation, but keep this in your heart, cultivate it within, right? And he also told them, when the time is right, then you'll be able to leave all that behind, right? And so anyhow, the years went by, and finally that moment came. Um, when it became clear that it was time to leave their government work behind. And for Rupa Goswami, it was a fairly easy thing to do. He, simply resigned, and it's described how he distributed his wealth to various persons and, got ready to live his new life of service, exclusive service to Mahaprabhu and his mission. But for Sanatan Goswami, it was more difficult because he was particularly dear to the Nawab, and he didn't want to let him go, right? And he was depending on him for his work. And so what Sanatan had to find a way like to get in trouble, right? And so he deliberately feigned illness, called in sick, but meanwhile was holding these, grand gatherings at his home, Bhagavatam recitation and this big assembly. And naturally the Nawab got the news that he wasn't sick at all. He's perfectly fine. Um, and so he subsequently had Sanatan arrested, right? And then there's a whole escapade where Sanatan has to bribe the jailer so he can get out of jail, traveling by dangerous paths, as a government fugitive, right? And another whole incident where he's almost killed by some dark characters on the road, and all sorts of things happen, and finally he reaches the lotus feet of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who at that time is in Varanasi, and there's this beautiful meeting that they have. Sanatan's filthy, right? He's been traveling for many days, hardly any food, and dirty and so on, long beard and hair, and he finally makes his way to the place where Mahaprabhu is staying at the home of Chandrasekhar, as I recall. Chandrasekhar Acharya sits on the doorstep because he's too shy to go in. And Mahaprabhu, right, in his divine omniscience, he senses his presence and sends Chandrasekhar, oh, can you tell me if there's a Vaishnava at the door, right? And then um, so Chandrasekhar goes out and he sees what looks like a Muslim beggar, right, seated on his doorstep. And so he goes back and tells Mahaprabhu, no, there's no Vaishnava at the door. And Mahaprabhu said, well, is there anyone at the door? Oh, there's this, Muslim fakir, tell him to come in, right? And so Chandrasekhar brings him in, and then Sanatan and Mahaprabhu, they have this incredible ecstatic reunion. Sanatan's like feeling so dirty and shy, and he's backing away, but Mahaprabhu is forcefully embracing him. And Sanatan saying, oh, please, my Lord, don't touch me, and I'm so dirty. And Mahaprabhu telling him, you are so pure, you could purify all the world. And there's this one beautiful verse, where he's saying, um, that to see you, Sanatan, to touch you, to hear you, to glorify you, this is the fulfillment of all of my senses, right? To touch the Vaishnava, to see the Vaishnava, to speak their glories, right? This is the real purpose of these senses, the sense of sight, touch, and so on, right? This is the real fulfillment of the senses in connection with the Vaishnava, right? And so very, very deeply Mahaprabhu is glorifying him and embracing him. Um, and then then Sanatan settles in, and then the next day or so then Mahaprabhu begins his instruction, and it's like a real iconic moment, we could say, in Mahaprabhu's Leela as a whole, because the whole conversation starts with this fundamental question, right? Sanatan Goswami asks, the whole conversation begins with Sanatan asking a series of questions. The first of which is, Ke Ami, who am I? Who am I? Right? Ke Ami, Kene Amai, and Jade Tapatai. Who am I? Why am I suffering? Right? Why am I here? What's the real purpose of life? Right? All of these like fundamental, basic questions Sanatan's asking. And so for this reason, Sanatan, he's become known as the Sambandha Acharya, right? Sambandha Gyan is so crucial and so fundamental to our spiritual practice, right? Sambandha Gyan means our understanding of what is what, what's the true nature of things. How does everything properly relate with one another, right? What is my real identity? What's my real purpose? What's my situation in this environment? What's my relationship with the divinity? What's the nature of that divinity, right? All these fundamental things. This is constitutes sambandha gyan. And so all of this is discussed elaborately in Mahaprabhu's discussion with Sanatan Goswami, as recorded in. I mean, this is the thing, right? We have all these things documented. I mean, it's one thing to say, oh, yes, there was this conversation that took place and they discussed really important stuff, but we actually have it recorded in black and white in detail. Like, my God, like, my God, how privileged are we? Right. So we all have, and then thanks to Srila Swami Maharaj Prabhupada, this has been translated into English and is now available on your internet browser. Like, my goodness, like, what is that? And not only English, but it's been translated in every language that's spoken in our Zoom room today, right? Portuguese and so on. Um, so this is also this discussion is all documented there, and then Mahaprabhu's answers begin with that fundamental knowledge, Jiver Srupahoy Krishna Nitya Das, right? Krishna Tatasta Shakti Beda Bed Prakash, right? That the Jiva soul, the living entities, us, we are constant. What are we actually, right? Are we American, Portuguese, Spanish, male, female, Ukrainian? Is that who we are, right? Rich, poor, black, white? No, we are Krishna Das, right? We constitutionally exist to love and to serve our beloved creator, Sri Krishna, right? Just as it is the nature of water to flow, to be wet, and so on. It is the nature of fire to burn and to spark, right? It is the nature of the sky, to be blue and so on. Everything in existence has its like intrinsic nature. So what is our intrinsic nature? To love and to serve our beloved Lord, right? Sri Krishna. We are one of his energies and we exist to love him and to serve him, right? This is the first answer that Mahaprabhu gives to Sanatan Goswami. So it's a very important discussion for us. It does get quite technical. I wouldn't say it's one of the most juicy parts of Chaitanya Charitamrita, but it's still important knowledge for us all to be aware of. And then Mahaprabhu, goes into more the nature of the jiva, the soul. He also goes into discussion of the nature of the Lord, his different expansions and different avatars, um, and yeah, so it's important knowledge for us all to have some familiarity with. So highly recommended. Um, so Sanatana Goswami, today is the day of his disappearance in this world. And Sanatana Goswami, there are many beautiful pastimes in Chaitanya Charitamrita, discussing his pastimes with Mahaprabhu. There's one which is particularly beautiful, when this occasion when so he's posted, right? Sanatan Goswami along with his brother Rupa, they're posted in Vrindavan and they're given this important task to put Mahaprabhu's teachings into writing, with reference to the scriptures, and also to reveal the lost holy places. Because, Vrindavan, as we know it today, it was not that 500 years ago. It was like a jungle. And remember, especially because of the Mohammedan rule, so many important deities, they were taken out, they were in hiding in different places, important temples were destroyed. And it didn't have this position of a significant pilgrimage place, as it has today. And so they were given this task to reveal all of these lost holy places of Vrindavan and Mathura Mandal, to establish them as dignified places of pilgrimage. Um, and Right. And then the other thing was to also take care of the pilgrims who were coming from other parts of India. And so Rupa and Sanatan, we can't really understand, how important their service was, right? So they did extensive, research and, labor in uncovering many of these lost holy sites, like, for example, Radha Kund and Shama Kund, right? These important lakes, right? Deities, important deities which were lost, hidden away, and uncovering them and reestablishing their worship. It was an incredible amount of work that they did. They also established the whole system of Madhukari, right? Madhukari is it's a way to take care of poor sadhus, right? And literally, Madhukari, it means like a bee, right? Because this was the system in India. I mean, this has always been a system in India, but I suppose in Vrindavan, it wasn't exactly established for all the reasons we mentioned before at that time. And so Madhukai refers to like how a bumblebee will go from flower to flower and collect a little honey for its sustenance. And so this was the practice in India, right? That poor sadhus, they would they're just living a simple life of sadhana, their spiritual practice. They don't have means of livelihood, and so they would go like door to door to householders and collect some alms, right? And then it doesn't stress everybody out. Everybody gives a little bit, a few chapatis, a little buttermilk or whatever, right? And so Rupa and Sanatan established this system in Vrindavan so that visiting sadhus, they would have some means to be able to go on day by day, right? Um, and so very important work that they did, right? So, but I was coming to tell this pastime, right? So Rup Sanatan, they were posted in Vrindavan with this very important work. But when they got the opportunity, they would travel to Jagannath Puri, where Mahaprabhu was based, right? And and so there was this one incident when Sanatan Goswami, and they didn't have trains and buses and cars and airplanes, and even to have like a bullock cart, that was something for rich people, right? So they're going by foot, barefoot. So it would be quite a journey, quite a journey of some weeks, and so many difficulties and challenges along the way, right? And so on one occasion when Sanatan was going to visit Mahaprabhu, he he came into contact with some contaminated water, and as a result, he developed this infection on his skin, and there are all these like oozing blisters, pus coming out of his pores, and so he reached Puri, and he was so ashamed, right? Because he felt he couldn't come too close to Mahaprabhu because he was feeling so contaminated. And every time he met of course, Mahaprabhu doesn't care, and Mahaprabhu's going to embrace him. And and literally like the pus on Sanatan's skin is like smearing on Mahaprabhu's divine form, and Sanatan Goswami is suffering so much, to see this happening, and to the point where he actually decides he can't tolerate this anymore. He's just going to give up his life. And so he makes a whole plan. It was during the time of the Rath Yatra festival, and has this whole plan worked out. He's going to throw himself under the wheel of the Jagannath cart. And Mahaprabhu, he's omniscient, of course, so he comes to understand what's happening, and so he comes to Sanatan, And he says, Sanatan, what are you doing? And he tells him, actually, you don't belong to yourself. You are mine, right? You're my property. You've offered yourself to me. You don't have the right to destroy your body. You belong to me. And he, at a certain point, he even turns to Haridas Thakur. Haridas Thakur is there. And he says, Haridas, look at this. Look at this man. He wants to destroy somebody else's property, he says. So it's a very instructive and sweet moment, right? That this is how the Vaishnavas think of their own upkeep, right? That they're taking care of themselves on behalf of the Lord because they belong to the Lord, right? Every breath, right? Every movement, every word is in service to their beloved Lord. And so they also take care of their body as a temple of the Lord, right? It is a vehicle for his service. And so in that mentality, they're maintaining themselves, right? And so it's a beautiful instruction too. We don't have any excuse to neglect our own upkeep because once we've offered ourselves, we now belong to the Lord. We have to take care of his property. And so this is how we can harmonize, right? Something that can be difficult to reconcile, right, for spiritual practitioners, these two sides, right, this material body and care and our movement in devotion. But actually, they are one and the same, right? It's part of the same package. So this is a beautiful moment, right, when Mahaprabhu tells him, you don't belong to yourself. You don't have any right to destroy your own body, but you belong to me. So please take care of yourself. And I need you, he says. I have so much I need to achieve in this world, and on my own, it's not possible. I need your help. So please, you take care of yourself, right? And so that's one particularly sweet moment with Sanatan and Chaitanya Charitamrita. And Sanatan Goswami, we hear he had this very special, unique kind of position in Vrindavan. Normally renunciates, they remain aloof from family matters, right? But Sanatan, he had this kind of unique position in Vrindavan where he was like a part of everyone's family. He would know everything that was going on in everyone's family, and sometimes different persons in Vrindavan would come and ask him for advice on various family matters, and he would, give advice with all of that, and to the point that we hear that. So today is the day of his departure from this world. We hear on this day when he passed, all the men in Vrindavan, they shaved their head, right? In India, there are so many rites and customs that are meant to be followed when one's father or different relatives pass away. But when one's father passes, then there's particular things one will do. One of them is shaving one's head. And so because all the residents of Vrindavan had this very close feeling relationship with Sanatan. When he passed away, many of them observed these rites, which one would traditionally follow when one's father passed away. This is the kind of place that Sanatan had in the hearts of the residents of Vrindavan. So that was something quite unique about him. And so many beautiful pastimes. I'll just tell one more pastime with Sanatan. Of course, many of you are familiar with all these things already, but it's always nice to taste them again and again. But another uh, pastime, which is really quite incredible, is this occasion when, and it kind of like shows you the heights of real devotion for the Lord, right? But Rupa Goswami, right? We hear he wanted to prepare this special sweet rice for Sanatan Goswami. And and he managed to collect the ingredients. Actually, we hear that very mysteriously there was this beautiful young girl who came and supplied these ingredients because he was feeling, oh, I want to make this special preparation for my guru. Sanatan was his elder brother and also like a guru to him, and may have even been a Diksha guru. I'm not 100% sure about that. But in any case, Rupa Goswami saw him as a guru. But interestingly, Srila Maharaj also mentioned that, because remember, Rupa Goswami, um, he's the head of our sampradaya, right? And we are Rupa Nugas, we are followers of Sri Rupa. Um, but Srila Maharaj mentions that uh, Sanatan Goswami, he also expressed this aspiration to be a follower of Rupa, right? He also felt that type of regard for his younger brother, Rupa, right? Zero envy, right? This is the world of great Vaishnava, zero envy. Um, so anyhow, Rupa Goswami was supplied mysteriously these ingredients. Um, and sorry, I'm just looking at our chat here. um, Then he invited Sanatan to come for this special preparation. And we hear Sanatan came and he honored this exquisite sweet rice. But he was also quite curious, like, how did Rupa manage to obtain such fine ingredients? And and so he asked him, where did you get this like fine rice and sugar and milk and so on? And Rupert told him, oh, this beautiful young girl, she came and she personally gave me these ingredients very mystically. And remember, right, as I said, Sanatan, he knew everybody in Vrindavan and everybody knew him. And so Sanatan was really curious, like, who exactly was this? And to the point where he went and actually inquired um, about who this girl was. And I believe she had also said she was from Yavat, right? Which is where Radharani had lived with her husband. And so Sanatan inquired there, and he couldn't find out about who this mysterious girl was. And so he came to the conclusion that Srimati Radharani herself had personally supplied these ingredients. And one would think that Sanatan would be overjoyed at such a thing, right? That, oh, Srimati Radharani herself personally came and supplied these ingredients. I am so fortunate. I am so blessed. And that, of course, would be an expression of great devotion. But the level of Sanatan Goswami's devotion is so high that he was unhappy to be the recipient of such favor, because his thinking was that, oh, my whole existence is to serve her. But now she has come to serve me. Oh, this is a terrible thing. This is how profound Sanatan Goswami's devotion is. That he doesn't allow even like a small space for the Lord to give anything in reciprocation. He wants to give, just like on our altars, Radharani, we don't even offer a garland to Radharani. She is so fixed in her posture of giving, of serving. We're unable to garland her, actually. And so in our altars, Srimati Radharani is in this posture of holding a garland to offer to Krishna. She's so fixed in that spirit of service and dedication. It is very difficult for us to serve her, right? And so this was the feeling of Sanatan towards Radharani. We want to serve her and she has come to serve us. This is a terrible thing. And he went and he actually chastised Rupa Goswami. Oh, how could you accept this? Our divine mistress, she has come and served us. This is a terrible thing. And this was his very extreme mood of devotion. So we worship that. And as I said, it kind of like opens up a new window of, like how could we even conceive of such a high mood of devotion, right? This is Sanatan Goswami. And of course, there are so many great devotees. We hear of them celebrating, receiving this type of favor, right? Madhavendra Puri, Srila Sridhar Maharaj makes some comparison. Madhavendra Puri, right? The Lord personally supplies him with sweet rice, prasad. And Madhavendra Puri is ecstatic to receive that, right? That's a very high and very wonderful thing. But Sanatan Goswami, he is at such a level, right, that he is unhappy to receive that favor. We cannot really understand, we definitely can't imitate, but we can honor, right, and celebrate and have our eyes, our vision expanded in hearing of such a high level of devotion. So that Sanatan Goswami, today is his day of disappearance from this world, and we're blessed to remember him. It is Vyasadeva, I think I might have mentioned in the beginning, and we're also so indebted to Vyasadeva. It is his appearance day, his birthday today, right? He is the giver of Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our great wealth, right? Srimad Bhagavatam, Vedavyas compiled all the Vedic knowledge, right? That is also a great contribution. But then finally, he distilled the essence with great clarity in Srimad Bhagavatam. And in that third verse, he explains, what is the greatness of this Bhagavatam. He says that there's that verse, Nigama Kalpa Trur Galitam Phalam, comparing this Bhagavatam to a sweet, ripe, juicy fruit, right? All the Vedas are like a tree, a wish-fulfilling tree, fulfilling one's different aspirations in this world. But then this Bhagavatam is the fruit on that tree, right? Which is giving the real fruit of all the Vedic knowledge, which is Krishna Prema, Krishna Bhakti, right? This is the real purpose of all the Vedic knowledge, right? And that is all explained very clearly in Srimad Bhagavatam. And Dharma Proji, this is then the second verse, Dharma Proji to Kaitavotra Padamo Nirmatsaranam Satam. Then the second verse is saying, and who will be able to appreciate this? Those who are free from envy, Nirmatsar. Because this presentation, everything I gave you before, it was adulterated spirituality. Spirituality adulterated with the ideals of exploitation and renunciation. But this Bhagavatam is completely pure. And I'm rejecting, and he's quite strong. Kaitava Dharma, cheating, everything I gave you before, it's all cheating religion, if we're just saying it straight. I'm rejecting all of that. You won't find any of that in this Bhagavatam. This is a very pure text. And who can appreciate this? Those who are free from envy. They will be able to appreciate this. Those who are really able to look at the world with open eyes, free from the filters of one's selfish intention, but to clearly see the environment, able to clearly see and understand what is my real position, right? What's my position as a supporting character in this greater show, right? Not my imaginary projection of being the main Hollywood character, right? Not that imagination, but my actual position as a blade of grass, a very happy blade of grass on the sidelines, or whatever it may be, right? So one who has this type of non-envious vision, they will be able to appreciate the message of this text, to celebrate that Sri Krishna is the real absolute being, is the origin of all. And then who am I? Krishna Supahoy? Jiva Supahoy Krishna. I am Krishna Nitya Das, right? Going back to Sanatan's instructions. I am a servant of that Krishna. I am not the supreme absolute being, but I am a servant of that supreme absolute being. Only those who are free from envy will be able to appreciate and celebrate this truth, right? And one who can accept this message, tapachai unmulanam, the whole disease of material existence will be taken up from its root, right? Normally, we're dealing with band-aid solutions, right, in this world. So many band-aid solutions and trying to fill the void within us. But it's all superficial. It's all superficial. Everything on Facebook and Instagram and everything else, right? Just dealing with superficial solutions, ignoring what is the real problem, right? And Sanatan Goswami's question, right? Who am I? Srila Sridhar, she mentions, that in this world, we're very busy with the solution, but there hasn't been any diagnosis yet, right? First get a real diagnosis from a real doctor, then apply this appropriate solution. So what Sanatan Goswami asks, this is the first question. What's the diagnosis, doctor? Who actually am I? What's the stuff that I'm made of? Right? Then I'll get the real prescription. Right? So tapachai unmulanam, all this suffering of this material world, it will be taken up from its root, because you're addressing the core issue here. Not just cutting weeds at a surface level, but taking them up from the root. Selfishness, individual separate interests. This is the real root of the problem, right? And so Srimad Bhagavatam is giving that real solution. So this is Vyasadev's introduction, right, to his final text of Srimad Bhagavatam. And then, ultimately that text is propagating the beauty of a life of love with that all-attractive divinity, Sri Krishna. It is a wonderful thing. It is not a scary thing, and it's not that we're being shortchanged, but only infinite joy, inconceivable joy, love, and beauty await us in that divine domain. So it is Vyasadeva, Krishna Dvaipai, and Vedavyas who gave this important text to us. And so we're also fortunate to honor him on this day, right? And as I believe I also mentioned in the beginning, all our guru is also seen as a representative of Vedavyas. And so this day is also an opportunity for us all to honor our own guru, right? And their indispensable position, right, in our spiritual life and everything that they've given us, right? And so we also remember with special regard our own Sri Gurudev, right? In the case of many of us, Srila Bhakti Sundar Govindadev Goswami Maharaj, he is our divine master who opened our eyes to this truth of divine knowledge. And I had the good fortune to be, I was in India some years, as many of you know, and on one occasion I had the fortune to be in the uh, uh, proximity of Srila Govinda Maharaj's divine presence, let's say, on this day. And it was actually a day that our Gurudev gave great importance to, because for him, it was a day to honor his own Guru, Srila Sridhar Maharaj. And for Srila Govinda Maharaj, every thought, every breath, every word, every deed, it was for his Guru Maharaj. There was nothing he did for himself. And so this was a very happy day for him to glorify and remember his Guru Maharaj. There weren't many, in those later years of Srila Govinda Maharaj's presence in this world, there weren't many days when he would personally come and participate in the temple programs. But this was one of those. It was maybe half a dozen days in the year, Janmashtami, Gaur Purnima, and so on. Few days in the year where Srila Govinda Maharaj would personally come and lead the program in the temple. And this was one of those days as I was able to witness. And so that, that really struck home to me, how important this was for Srila Govinda Maharaj. And so I'm very happy that today we can gather. Coincidentally, this is the day of our Thursday meeting. So I'm very happy we can have this opportunity to remember something of the glory of this day and glory of our Sri Gurudev. So I'm going to close there for today. And what a beautiful gathering we have. Savasini Didi has also joined us. Gangalila's tuning in from the Govinda Mela in California. Sulali.
Almost at the Govinda Mela Dandavats.
Oh,
We
you're
had to
you're on the
we
way.
had to stop. We drove really. We took our time, and then my son is with me, and we were like staying over here. So today is the last leg, and I think the at the ashram the procession going up via Govinda is actually tomorrow. So they're not doing it today because I think today is full moon. But that's so we'll be there for like later today.
Okay, great, great. Dulal Krishna's also tuned in. Somya Sham and Vijay in Ireland. Axel, California. Dana, that's very exciting. Dana, we haven't had you for a while. Wonderful to have you with us.
Hare
And
Krishna.
love, Haribol. And we have a Nazar. Oh, Nazar, I think I've heard about you. You're helping with some of the online projects. Wonderful. You've joined us today. Welcome. And Ramananda Prabhu is joining us from California. Krishna Chaitanya. Oh, I think we said hello already. Nazar, Hare Krishna, Haribol. Dandavad. And well, does anyone want to add any final comments or last question, or should we close there for today? Okay. Well, my gratitude for all of your good company. Jai Shri Bhakti Sandar Govinda Dev Goswami Maharaj ki Jai, Shri Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Dev Goswami Maharaj ki Jai, all the assembled devotees, sincere seekers ki Jai, Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki Jai, Shri Guru Purnima ki Jai, Shri Vyasadeva Avirbhav Mahamahotsav ki Jai, Shri Sanatan Goswami Tirobhav Titi ki Jai. Jai Gaur Premanande. Haribol.
Well, I'd like to make one quick comment.
Yes, of course, Devi Shari Didi.
So we have to chant Hare Krishna,
Yes, we do.
but lately I just used to chant my japa and always like that. And then lately I said, oh, I can chant while I'm at school or just walking along. And lately I've been doing that, just trying to always, maybe I'm mumbling, but like that chanting, quote unquote chanting. And something amazing I notice is that it becomes it's like you enter a breeze and you're just moving along where normally you'll feel oppressed by the environment. It's because it's so hot here and it's intense. I'm on university campus. So it's kind of an intense atmosphere and so many buildings, and I sometimes feel oppressed. But just chanting is like you enter a jet stream. I don't know if others can have this, but this is like something new for me where you're chanting and you become not with an intention to enter a jet stream, but the environment, external environment, just seems to dissipate. And you're moving along like unbothered and thinking, wow, this is amazing. I didn't know that this can happen. So I just want to share that experience. It's a new experience the last 72 hours, but we should always take shelter of the holy name, like even just softly chanting. And it's like you were saying earlier, you will feel moved along, like free from the external environment, the tangible environment will just start to dissipate.
That's
Because really,
beautiful.
it's like a landfill. If you look at the landfill, that's really what everything is in tangible world. It will just disappear like that and become like kind of rude to say, but like rubbish. It becomes like, oh, this is just rubbish. Why am I feeling the oppression of that? Gradually, always everything in very, very. Gurudev said, try to tolerate the speed of your development. It's very, very slow, less than an inch every day. So if we can just tolerate that speed.
When I was in Ireland just recently, there was one Ukrainian devotee, Darya Leela. Some of you may know her. She came to me one day and she said, is the Maha Mantra magic? She said, because she said, whenever I chant the Maha Mantra, everything changes. So
Wow.
would you say that it's magic? She asked me, like very sincerely, she asked me, and I said, well, I won't object to that, I won't object to that. So we're very fortunate when we can experience something of the transformative power of the holy name, right? When we have even a touch of a real connection, it transports us, right, to another place. Thank you for sharing
And
that.
even
Sorry, Didi.
but even sometimes we think, oh, it's not working. And I'm like, what kind of way is that to think? Like you have to debate with yourself. You think I'm chanting it and it's not working.
Hmm.
And then suddenly you have some, it's like Guru Maharaj says the Lord is aware of you. He's aware of everything about you, more than you are aware.
Hmm.
Just trust the process, have faith. Like everything is moving on
Right,
faith.
right, right.
Everything is about faith. And when we take that attitude, we see the magic actually.
Hmm.
See
Hmm.
it.
Hmm.
Not
Jai.
that we see it like that, but
Jai Shri
okay.
Harinam Sankirtan
Jai,
Ki Jai Divishai Didi Ki.
jai,
Have a
all
beautiful
the
Jai,
week
devotees.
and
Jai,
see you all next time.
you too.
jai,
Jai
jai,
Shri
Devotees.
all
Vishnu
devotees.
Ki Jai.
Jai,
Jai Gurudev.
jai,
Jai Gurudev.
Gurudev.